Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome to another League of Legends guide. Today we are covering Jungle Hecarim.
Embrace death.
Hecarim's a champion with high mobility and great sustain in the jungle. He has a very strong early and mid game and can fill either the role of a bruiser or a tank. His kit gives him some very strong ganks, which is where he gets his high snowball potential. Once we get our Trinity Force, we're going to start doing some very devastating damage when we combine it with auto attacks from the Spellblade passive Trinity Force provides. Hecarim though does unfortunately lack some sort of CC. He does have a knockback from his devastating charge and a short duration flee from his ultimate, but that's all he really brings. Well, of course besides his high mobility and high damage. Hecarim, however, does kind of fall off in the late game, but with his strong early and mid game, he usually doesn't even make it there. Then finally, with his spammable Q, which does have a relatively high mana cost, he is a very mana hungry champion. Although he's not a very popular meta pick at the moment, he can still snowball and easily carry solo Q. For my Masteries, I like to go 12 Ferocity and 18 Resolve, grabbing Strength of the Ages as my keystone mastery. The Resolve tree is a great way of getting some extra tankiness and also some nice tenacity so he can't get kited as easily. We then of course get the increased sustain from our runic armor and recovery. On the Ferocity side, we just focus on getting a little bit of increased damage. If you then wanted to go for a full offensive Hecarim, then you could go 18 Cunning and get Thunderlord's Decree. I, however, don't like being that squishy on Hecarim, and I really prefer having Strength of the Ages. For my runes, I go Armor Penetration Reds, Armor Yellows, Cooldown Reduction Blues, and Movement Speed Quints. Hecarim's a champion who usually only gets cooldown reduction from his Trinity Force and Spirit Visage, so having this extra cooldown reduction basically makes us CDR capped. We then take the armor so we don't take as much damage in the jungle, and the armor penetration works better on our Q than just some straight up attack damage, at least in those early ganks. Finally, Hecarim is a champion who does scale off of his movement speed because of his passive, so having those movement speed quints is a great way of having a bit better ganks, yet having more damage at the same time. For our summoner spells, Smite and Ghost are really the only ones that I'd recommend. Smite is a 100% requirement on a jungler since it will allow you to clear through the jungle, secure dragons and barons, buy your Cinderhook or a warrior enchanted item, and gives you the strong offensive smite from a stalker's blade or a skirmisher's saber. Ghost, on the other hand, is generally a much stronger pick than Flash on Hecarim. It yet again works really great with your passive and your devastating charge ability. It will add a ton of mobility in his ganks and teamfights, and with all the movement speed, devastating charge, and onslaught of shadows, he'll get wherever the hell he wants. He's kinda like a Mundo. So let's kick off those abilities by looking at your passive, Warpath. Hecarim gains bonus attack damage equal to 15 to 30% based on his level of his bonus movement speed. Very simple to understand, and it's why we want to take stuff like Ghost and movement speed quints on Hecarim, because the movement speed's obviously great on a melee champion to begin with, but his attack damage then scales off it as well. It's also part of the reason that I always go Trinity Force over Iceborne Gauntlet, at least usually, because you do get some extra movement speed from the Trinity Force and not on the Iceborne. But now let's look at your Q ability, Rampage. Hecarim cleaves nearby enemies, dealing physical damage reduced to 66% against minions. If Hecarim then damages at least one enemy with Rampage, he reduces its base cooldown on subsequent casts by 1 for 8 seconds, and this stacks up to twice for a minimum cooldown of 2 seconds. So since this ability is a cleave and it has a really short cooldown, it's great for clearing through the jungle. Since the Spellblade effect on Trinity Force and Iceborne Gauntlet does have a 1.5 second cooldown, this also works really well with Rampage, as it will have a 2 second cooldown if you are spamming it. This is why one of these items is a requirement on Hecarim, and gives him a massive power spike when he does finally acquire it. But now let's look at the W, Spirit of Dread. When activated, Hecarim surrounds himself with Spirit of Dread for 4 seconds, dealing magic damage per second to all enemies within its reach. While this ability is active, Hecarim is healed for 20% of the damage taken by enemies from any source within the area, capped from minions and monsters. So this ability is great in the jungle, as you can use it on jungle camps and sustain as you are hitting them. When in a team fight, it's great for the exact same reasons. You'll jump in with either your E or R, and then you can activate this, and when you or enemies are hitting people when in that range, you will be getting healed. That's really all there is to the ability. Make sure you activate it in ganks, the jungle, and in team fights, as you will deal some magic damage per second and get healed for damage you or your teammates deal in that zone. Alright, let's move on to our E ability, Devastating Charge. Hecarim is temporarily ghosted and gains bonus movement speed for 4 seconds, beginning at 25% and increasing to 75% over 3 seconds. When Hecarim is charging, his next basic attack gains bonus attack range, knocks back his target, and deals physical damage. The damage and knockback are increased based on how far Hecarim traveled during Devastating Charge's duration, ending its effects in the process. So this, of course, is your main mobility tool. The main use for this ability is going to be when you're coming in for a gank from behind and you can knock them towards your own team. You're also going to be able to combine this with your ghost since the distance traveled will be, of course, longer and it will knock them back farther and deal more damage. If you are trying to escape from an enemy, you can activate Devastating Charge for a nice movement speed buff, so you have a much easier time getting away. Now, your last ability, your ultimate, Onslaught of Shadows. Hecarim summons Spectral Riders and dashes forth with them in a line, becoming immune to crowd control while charging and dealing magic damage to all enemies in their path. Enemies within range of where Hecarim stops also flee from him for 1 second. So the main thing to note about this ability is you want to use it a tiny bit farther than where the enemy champion is, so they will flee away from you, but towards your team. The AoE range of the ability is not massive though, so keep that in mind. So it's really strong in ganks because usually you'll close the gap with your E, and as soon as an enemy uses their escape or flash, you can ultimate towards them and still get onto the target very easily. In teamfights, you're then going to want to try to dive onto the backline with this ability, fleeing all the high damage, high kill priority targets in the process. If you are getting ganked or trying to escape and your E is not going to be enough mobility for you to escape, if you still have your ultimate off cooldown, you can also use it as if it was a flash. For our skill order, we first want to put a point into our ultimate whenever we can at 6, 11, and 16. Then we focus on maxing our Q first, as it is our main way of doing damage and works really well with the Trinity Force or an Iceborne Gauntlet. Then we start maxing our E because the mobility it does provide is really nice, and the cooldown of the ability does go down 2 seconds per rank. Then last, we do focus on maxing our W as it is based off of our ability power. Hecarim has a pretty good jungle clear and can really start wherever he wants. You are, however, pretty mana hungry early on, so I would suggest you get your blue as either your second or third jungle camp. I personally like to start on my red side, then take my wraiths, and then finally move on to my blue buff third. Once you get that blue buff, you can either invade the enemy jungle, gank, or buy and then go back to your jungle and have a very easy clear with that blue buff. You'll also want to try to finish off your jungle clear on the side you think will be pushed by the enemy. Basically, pick whatever side you think has the stronger lane. If they are pushed, then you can usually get a rather easy first blood with your Devastating Charge and Ghost combo. To pull off a successful gank, you need to knock the enemy back towards your team with your Devastating Charge. You can run down the river of a push lane, then sweep in from behind and knock them into your team. You're also able to sweep in from behind the enemy tower if the lane isn't too pushed. So this picture here is what I'm talking about. If the green is your allies and the red is the enemies, you are this blue arrow here. As you can see, the enemy has warded the bush and river, and that's not a successful gank path considering they're not pushed. Instead, we go up and around the back, make sure you do use your ghost when you are coming towards the tower, then activate your charge and push them into your team. This is a great way to catch the enemy off guard, because they will think they're safe when they do have a ward there. They generally won't be expecting a gank from behind. Once you have successfully knocked the enemy into your team, you'll want to activate Spirit of Dread and start landing your Rampage while also auto-attacking in between with those Spellblade procs. When the enemy tries to escape, you can then use your Onslaught of Shadows to make them flee back towards your team. Hecarim's a pretty solid team fighter because of his AoE damage, fear, and his tankiness. Usually you'll want to spread out their team with a 5-man fear from Onslaught of Shadows, or knock a high kill priority target into your team. After this, you'll want to focus on the backline threats of the enemy team. Focus either their AP or AD carry, because they'll have no other option but to focus you, which should put your team at an advantage. In those fights, make sure you do activate your Spirit of Dread to get sustained, then do damage with your Rampage plus Spellblade procs. So now let's look at some hard matchups, and keep in mind these obviously aren't all of them, but I am going to cover 6 of his hardest ones. So anyways, first up, Rammus. Now he's not hard because he's just going to keep killing you, but he's hard because you can't kill him. His power comes from his ganking and his map presence, so you'll have to try to keep up some vision to help deal with his consistent ganking. The next thing you're going to have to do is try and counter gank him whenever you can. Wukong is then a really hard matchup to deal with if he gets ahead of you. He's going to outduel you early on and is always a threat to you and your team with his Cyclone. Once you do get your Trinity Force, you can start to win against him, but don't fight him too much early on. Shyvana is then a champion that outduels you pretty much all game long and has great late game scaling as well. You, however, have much better ganks. But then the bad thing is, she's very good at counter ganking. So the best thing you can do here is keep vision on her as much as possible and don't fight her too much 1v1, try to outmaneuver her. So here are 3 more hard matchups, and first up, Volibear. Yet again, he's a champion that you don't want to duel early on. He's very strong with his passive Chosen of the Storm and deals a lot of early damage with his Frenzy. Hecarim, however, has much better scaling as the game does progress, so you pretty much just have to wait till later on to actually kill him. Then there is Olaf, and he's one of the strongest junglers right now, and the most likely one that you'll probably see. He's got a very strong early game, and you need to avoid him as much as possible until you do get your Trinity Force. He's then also going to be rather annoying because he can't be fleed from your onslaught of shadows, so if you can, wait until it's over. Last up, Nidalee, and she's just incredibly annoying. She's got so much mobility and can take really weird routes to gank, so it's very hard to keep track of where she is. Once you do get your Trinity Force, you're going to be able to outdamage her, but unfortunately, you're not going to be able to stick to her. Wait until those late game team fights because she falls off even harder than you. Now let's cover our last section, the item build. So we're going to want to start with a Hunter's Talisman, Refillable Potion, and a Warding Totem. For our core build, we'll want to get Stalkers enchanted with Warrior, then our Trinity Force, and a Deadman's Plate. Trinity Force is so strong on Hecarim that some people even take it before they finish their jungler item, so this is a very viable option. This will give you a ton of early game damage, and you will get some nice tankiness from that Deadman's Plate, and some added mobility as well. Now if you do prefer to get tankier instead, you could get a Cinderhulk, or an Iceborne Gauntlet, or perhaps even both. I'm not too big of a fan of the Iceborne Gauntlet on Hecarim right now, but Cinderhulk is a very viable item. Also, remember that Skirmisher's Saber is a great pick as well, which is of course the red smite. You can take it over Stalkers, but I do prefer Stalkers myself. If I do have some forms of crowd control in the lanes I'm ganking though, I will take the red smite. For our boot options, we can get Boots of Swiftness for full-on mobility, Merc Treads if there is some sort of CCs or AP on the enemy team, Ninja Tabis against AD, or Boots of Mobility for really fast ganks. Then, for the item pool, if we wanted to add some more damage, we could get the Yumu's Ghostblade. The Activate works so well on Hecarim, but you will be a really squishy target, which is why you don't take it too often. 2 better items in my opinion are the Sterak's Gauge and the Maw. Both are great ways to stop you from getting bursted and add some damage at the same time. Then, one of the items I usually get in my item build, the Spirit Visage. The healing works great from your W, and you will get that 10% CDR, which is really nice in our build. Banshee's Veil is then another great magic resist item, and the shield can be great for when you are engaging, as it can block a CC. For armor options, we have the Randuins if we do want to reduce crits, Thornmail against really high AD auto-attacking teams, and Frozen Heart pretty much for the same reason. If we then wanted to instead add some split push, we have the ZZ Rot Portal, and in that ultra late game, Guardian Angel is super strong, coming back to life is friggin' awesome. So, for our tanky bruiser build, we take our core, add that Spirit Visage, and a Guardian Angel. We'll still deal a ton of damage with the Warrior Enchantment and that Trinity Force, but we'll be really tanky with the Deadman's Plate, Guardian Angel, and Spirit Visage. For our full tank build, we instead took that Cinderhulk and Iceborne Gauntlet combo, stuck with that Deadman's Plate, added a Spirit Visage, and then a Randuins. We don't have near as much damage, but god damn are we ever tanky. So that concludes our Jungle Hecarim guide. If you guys enjoyed the guide, please make sure you like, and if you're new here, you could also subscribe. You can visit our website, egamingtv.com, for a nice list of our guides, or you can visit us on Twitter where we do skin giveaways at the end of every month at egaming_TV. I also do have a podcast I'm co-hosting, and we are looking for guests, so if you are interested, that link will also be in the video description. But anyways, thank you guys a ton for watching. I hope you guys did enjoy the video, and I will see you guys in the next champion guide. Peace.
See, I've been paper chasing. These females have been choosing. Since the kid been elevating. But see, man, I've been chasing money. I got these hoes in my team. That's really all that I need. Let me tell you about me. Tell you about me. Let me tell you about me. Tell you about me.